Namaste, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom, Mir, Niha, Buenos dias, Buenos tardes, Buenos noches, Hesiche, Aquaba, welcome. What up, though? This is supplementary recording of the IG Live joint from earlier today. I was intending to share these joints, but I talked for a while. And it becomes appropriate to sum up that joint, plus the countdown begins actually as I was doing that. So I'm recording this off the live, so don't worry about that duration, but still trying to keep this an hour because there's something coming up in about an hour. I also tried to do this whilst it was light, but faint. Well, I was supposed to close that window a bit. Anyways, all right, so we wildin'. What am I sharing here? This is a follow-up from a previous from IG Live, and this is kind of like an introduction about myself, what I'm about, what I do, how I get into this game of mixed race idness, and then also some concepts that don't hear a lot of people talking about. The green dot on my nose is from the recording device. All right. Anyways, so that's what this is. And again, can we do it in an hour? We shall see. Here we go. Me. All about me. What I am, who I am, what I do. This is it. So I'm born and raised here in the Cuyahoga area. This is where I reside. If it was light outside, I would show you the shop. But I already showed that earlier today in another recording. Which one? Somewhere around there. Anyways, I'm born here and raised here in the Cuyahoga area. Ohio, a.k.a. Cleveland. East side in the Heights. Wow, do I give my address as well? But that's it. My family, we come from a multi-ethnic background. That includes Israel, Ethiopia, Igbo, Akan, Twi, Muskoki, Celtic, Sverige, Dansk. That is Israel, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Ghana, the Seminole tribe, Ireland, Sweden, and Denmark. That's my ethnic heritage. That is my ancestry. So, I attend a private school for the first 11 years of my life, a Montessori school, and very sheltered. 13 children graduate, 13 students graduate in my graduating class, 8th grade. Very sheltered environment, very Eurocentric. Didn't talk too much about race. I knew I was different, but to be honest, I was conscientious about money because Rafi Montessori, it wasn't one of the elite private schools. It was a startup. Montessori itself is somewhat, particularly in those days, Montessori was just getting started. Well, Montessori's been around for a while, but it was like it had yet to get to where it is today. And I don't know like how it stands, but it seems to be further elite today than it was 40 years ago when I started. I'm 47, just to be specific. So, anyways, it was an interesting situation. My father is a pharmacist during his life. He passed away a number of years ago. So he's a pharmacist, and my mother is a teacher. So middle class, and we actually, our first house is in EC, East Cleveland, which is, you can Google that. Love and peace to all brethren in EC. There is a rivalry because I moved to Heights, which was actually right across the street from where I grew up, or from that house. And then we moved to the Heights when I was about 5 years old, particularly because of the school system. And the idea was that my parents wanted to send me to the public school system here, but I liked the private school I was in so much for kindergarten and everything else. They wanted to keep the thing going, so I stayed all the way up through the end of it, which was 8th grade. That's where it stops. So, like I said, wow. I'm talking about economics rather than ethnicity, but it plays a role. So, like I said, I knew I was different. Like, I didn't pay attention to it, didn't pay a big deal to it or whatever, but just, okay, my father's this way, my mother's that way. Yeah, different strokes for different folks. Some people have the mother is short, the father is tall. like all different types of differences. So I was just like, okay, whatever. Now, the most of the people in the school were of European ancestry, but that still didn't, my mother is European, straight up Scandinavian. So like it still is like whatever. As I get older, I see like distinctions of behavior, but even then, to be honest, this is what I'm getting to. Like I always perceived that like I always had like a conscientiousness of my status as socioeconomic. Like I didn't have as much money. My family didn't have as much money as everybody else did. So all the nice clothes, all the nice toys and everything else like that, I was conscientious of not having that like my friends and everybody else does. All the Transformers and G.I. Joes and everything else like that. I had some, but I didn't have nearly as much as everybody else did. So that's what I was conscientious of, a little bit insecure about that. So any differentiation of treatment that I received was attributed to that particular experience. Now, again, to be honest, I didn't get bullied nearly at all. The type of bullying I got was like that passive aggressive intellectual bullying. But even then, like it was a small school. Like we see each other all the time, and there's not like it's difficult to kind of do that because there's a very small teacher to student ratio. There's a lot of intervening and whatever else, and so there were some times. Oh yeah, should I share this one? Maybe I do. It's been a long time since I talked about this one. Haha. Hey, okay, I'll do that. All right. So all the way through elementary school, like didn't even think about race too tough. And like even when older students would kind of tease me or whatever, I just thought, I don't have as much money. I don't have the brand names joints as the members only jacket and everything else that everybody else does. So that's why they're teasing me. It's because I ain't got the money. So what can I do? I'm not going to blame my parents for that. I'll just take it. So that's what I do. Then get to middle school, and that's when things get further like involved, and I think that's the experience for a lot of people. Like we become adolescent, we start seeing a lot of the world, how it is, current events, politics, puberty, and the whole mating dance. So that's when things become increasingly like actual and as well as contentious. So again, very small environment, people, the bullying attributed to socioeconomic. But then when I started to think about race, I started hearing the N-word in elementary school. I'll share that story. How about that first? I remember being in elementary school, a friend comes up to me, and this was a friend from another class. We were cool, whatever, but we didn't know each other too well. And he's like, yo, I got a joke for you. Now, this is an interesting lesson. This is an interesting lesson about race relations. So I have he's like, I got a joke for you. Okay. And I'm going to say the joke as it is without sugarcoating it. So he sang a song, and this was a song to a television show that was popular before even our time. But anyways, here it is. He said what it was. Daniel Boone was a man, yes, a big man, but the bear was bigger, so he ran like a nigger to the tree. Now, if you just look at it as a joke, it's not funny, motherfucker. Don't even laugh at that shit. So, but me at fourth grade, 9 years old, 10 years old, whatever, I just say, interesting. Okay, I didn't know how to take that. I knew enough to know what that meant, but no one ever said it to me directly. But I knew enough, like he's calling that out. So I'm like, okay, my dad just got insulted with that. Like my ancestry on my dad's side just got insulted with that. But didn't have a lot of comeback for that at that moment. And another friend of mine was with us in hearing the joke. So then after that, immediately after that, as is the case in these type of situations, immediately after the one friend, the brother, sings that song, he's like, no offense. And then he goes off. So then I was like, wow, what just happened there? And then so a little bit later, we went back to our classroom, did our work, whatever. And then my friend who was with us, who was of a different ethnicity, effectively, he's also of a different religiosity. I'm not going to be specific because that plays less of a factor. It actually is relevant, but I ain't going to put that into this at the moment. But he's of a different ethnicity as well as a different religiosity. But he's also of European ancestry and very much assimilationist. So, but all that being said, it all plays a factor into the story. So a little bit later that same day, he tells me, yo, I got something for you. And he's like, yo, I don't like that joke that so and so said before. So I got a comeback for you. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And so he sang another version of the same song. He said, Daniel Boone was a man, yes, a big man, but bigger was the donkey, so he ran like a honky to the tree. And again, I'm like, okay, now my mother's just been insulted, and now all my ancestry on my mother's side has been insulted. And I'm like, so anyways, that was fourth grade. as I recall. Fourth or fifth, but fourth I'm rather certain. So there was that. And that was like there are other introductions to race, but that one just comes to mind at the moment. So that's that. Later, 6th grade. This is where the rubber hits the road, because this does have a significant effect on my life to this day. 6th grade. I'm getting into this story. Wow, I gotta get straighten up this hair for this one. Hey, let's get ready. All right, see, because this like tells my life right here. 6th grade. There are so many things at this point. Crushes, even just not crushes, but a crush, and additionally. So, 6th grade. I'll preface this by saying up to that point, all my teachers were women. 6th grade, the principal of the school is a man, and this is the first time I have him as a teacher. So it's my first time having a teacher up to that point, and this is relevant because this goes into like my relationship with women, and me wanting to be a pleaser and everything else like that, and often for very sexual reasons, even at that age. But anyways, that might be TMI, but I'm being honest. So, but the point is, like, this was a man, and like don't do the same thing with that. And the dude didn't like me too much, and that was something different for me, because I would always try to find a way of like pleasing my teacher so that she would have some type of favor towards me. That was throughout my life up to that point, to age 11. So now I have this teacher. He don't like me too much. I mean, he's not at me too tough, but like he don't like me too much. And I don't know necessarily why, but I know he don't like me too tough. So anyways, on this one lesson, social studies, we are learning about the U.S. Constitution, and we are taught the Three-Fifths Compromise. And we are taught that the Three-Fifths Compromise is a compromise between the slaveholding states of the South and the northern states who don't hold slaves, basically, officially or whatever. And it's in the beginning of the formation of the United States. So they are deciding representation in Congress and in the Senate, particularly within the House of Representatives, about how many representatives a state can have within the legislature. Basically the voting power, and additionally. So it's like auspicious, like significant implications with this. So, ironically, but not unexpectedly, the southern states want the slaves that are in there, which was a large portion of the population, wanted all the African slaves to be counted as one full person. And ironically, but unexpectedly, the northern states wanted all the African slaves in southern states to be counted as 0 people. Why? Because the standard philosophy, mentality, perception, belief, teaching, culture, ideology during that period and continuing is that people of African ancestry are not human, are subhuman, less than, not equal. And so in this debate, this was a very tangible expression of that mentality. And ironically, the states that are holding that have the slaves want the slaves to be counted as full human, whereas the northern states, who are supposed to be the liberal, loving, accepting brethren who don't have slaves, want the slaves to be counted as 0 human. Well, they are able to reach a compromise. 3/5. They'll count as 60% human. How about that? And that's the law on the books to this day. Now we say, well, we don't believe in that, and that's what was told in the social studies class, and that's what I would like to believe during that period. Like, oh yeah, of course, we're all good, we're all along the table here together, we're all getting along, we're all equal, yeah, okay. But at the back of my mind, I'm like, all right, we'll see about this. Like, now again, I'm 11 years old, so I have to like be mindful, because I can't take on the world at 11 years old, at least at that point in this post-industrialized society and civilizational paradigm. But I just keep that in the back of my mind. All right. We'll see how this goes. We'll see how this plays out. And again, I'm not vindictive, because I genuinely want to be agreeable and everything else like that. But okay, now it doesn't stop there, because then we talk about it, because that's part of what the intellectuals do. We process this, analyze this. So this was somewhat disappointing, just on an intellectual part, right? But then the topic got to, so what would Peter be? Interesting. Then we got into mathematics, and it was actually, this is where it got disappointing. 3/10, that doesn't seem to be mathematically accurate. 3/5, just like everybody else. 0, I don't know what application of principle is applied to that. What rationale is applied to that conclusion? But to be honest, I don't know if anybody actually said 0, but I know somebody definitely did say 3/10, and I was just like. Then somebody else said 4/5, and I mean, logically, that's a very logical question, and it's like a legit question. But that's how asinine and an atrocity cognitively that is, because you're literally looking at a person that you know for many years, and you're figuring out how much of a person that person actually is. 3/5, 4/5, and the child is legitimately pontificating on that, because the child is listening to the authority and just doing the mathematics. Fucked up is what it is. Am I getting a little bit animated today? Anyways, nobody ever said 1 in that conversation. I remember that too. So again, it wasn't just a matter of history, and that's what we do, but then we start to talk about it and process it and own it in that discussion. And I was just like, wow, I saw things in a different light from that point. But again, quiet, because I'm 11 years old. So then life continues on. Now I'll say one other thing that happened in middle school. Along the lines of race. Love and peace to everybody at my Montessori school too. There ain't hate, and there's not anger at this moment, at this point in my life. But it is appropriate to recognize what happens and how this shapes us and what we learn from it. And so I share these stories. I might get a little bit explicit in my interjections, but still, again, there's purposefulness within all of this. And so particularly recognizing, because things have changed very little since then. It was 40 years ago, and that seems like a long time ago to just say 40 years. But it's very troubling to think of how little things changed since then. And this was 20 years thereabouts after, over 20 years after civil rights. So there's already a generation that emerges after the civil rights movement. And to be honest, the whole thing about diversity and kumbaya that's going on today, it was very similar to 40 years ago, at least 30 years ago. Anyway, so all right, it's beneficial to discuss this, and I'm not trying to call cats out or whatever, but facts is facts, history is history, lessons are lessons, purpose is purpose. And here we go with the further drawing. So was this the same year? It's difficult for me to say. Maybe it was the next year, 7th grade. It might have been the next year, 7th grade. Either way, it's like an involved story, but eventually, basically, I got harassed throughout middle school. Not throughout middle school, but I got harassed thoroughly, particularly in this year. And it might have been 7th grade, because things were smaller at that point, and there were less people above us in terms of bullying or whatever. And the cats in the grade before me didn't even it's actually all girls in the upper class. But the people in my class, particularly the girls in my 7th grade class, would harass me. And it's not without reason. I wasn't perfect or whatever else, but also I wasn't a fighter or whatever else, and so it was very difficult for me to get back at people, particularly at girls. So and we didn't date, we didn't do any social things or whatever in middle school. We didn't have any of that. We had no dances. We had none of that. Sometimes we went to the mall, and that's about it in terms of social stuff. Otherwise, biking and whatever else. But anyways, so I would get harassed, just joked and clowned and teased by the girls. And so I got frustrated. And so at some point, me and my friend, I'm not going to say his name either, because I'm trying to be somewhat incognito with putting other people on this. But my friend and I, two of the only people of African ancestry, I want to say in the middle school, but there were a couple other in the year beneath me, but two of the only males, the boys of African ancestry in the middle school, and maybe even for a few years after that. One day I do a rap, and it was basically me. I did the rap myself, but he was with me, and I showed it to him. And basically the rap was like insulting all the girls because of the insults that I was receiving, and I wasn't doing anything back. So I wasn't going around showing people out. He was the only one I showed, to the best of my recollection. Yeah, I think he's the only one I showed, because I laid into it. So it was expletives, all types of inappropriate sexual references, because I wasn't perfect, and yeah, but that's another story. So anyways, I showed it to him, and it was like I said, it was basically me, but we were both blamed for it together. How that happened, because after, I guess what happened was, like, I kind of, like, maybe they didn't joke him too much. So he didn't have, like, the same type of thing. Plus, he was further reserved accordingly. So I kind of roped him into it or whatever else. So anyways, I wrote it. He saw it, and then eventually, like, I had it in my notebook, and I guess he told somebody else about it. And eventually, maybe he told another girl about it. So the girl, unbeknownst to me, when I was doing something else, whatever, took my notebook and showed it to the principal. So that, I think, and that was a Friday, because I was going over to my friend's house later that day, and then I got a call from my parents saying, "Yo, we just got a call from the principal. We're about to come pick you up because we got a meeting with the principal the next day." I didn't observe Shabbat during those days, so I had a meeting at school with the principal on a Saturday. Oh, serious business. And so in that meeting with both of my parents and the principal in the principal's office, the principal says, "Oh, we've been informed of this this thing." Now, I don't know if I'm trying to think how that happened, because I'm rather certain, like, the book was there, like the rap was there, and as evidence, because they would have to have that to show my parents. But I was like oblivious of it being missing, and so that doesn't seem. I'm trying to think how that fits, because I didn't even know, like, anybody knew about it other than my friend. So, like, the whole thing was just like like I just got caught by surprise by that. So and it all kind of unraveled afterwards. And so, like, they're like, "Yo, this is unacceptable. Like, can't be doing this." And so we got punished. Both me and my friend got punished for it. And then there was, like, this whole thing about needling people. That was the term, and I was like, "Oh, come on, that's so BS." But anyways, and the principal, to his credit, and the school, to his credit, did recognize that I was being harassed, and said that there had been a culture of needling, and that we need to stop needling in school. Meanwhile, nobody else got punished for needling, and us two brothers of African ancestry did get punished. And what was the punishment? To do the yard work before and after school begins. So, for a month. So, whilst all the parents are picking up their children, and whilst all the parents are dropping off their children, for half an hour each day, before and after, if I recall correctly, it was at least before. I think it was both after as well. Half an hour before and half an hour afterwards, raking the leaves in the school, where the cars are queuing and everything else like that. So we know what we do with our insubordinate blackie students. And so I was just like, and I knew that was racist. I knew that, institutional. And I was just like, and my parents did little, and then what could my parents do? I mean, what I did was messed up, but yo, come on. So that's tough. Anyway, so being mixed, that's my story. Yeah, wow, I'm half an hour into this. So where do I go from there? I go from the small 13 student graduation Montessori school, 8th grade, to a large public school, the Heights, with about 4,000 students. Culture shock. But during that period, I've been chastised by calling this the golden era of hip hop, but I'll say a golden era of hip hop. There was Afrocentricity. People were becoming increasingly conscious, and there was additional amount of, like, social movements and stuff like that during that period. This is 30 years ago. And I'm learning about life. I'm learning about politics. I'm learning about racism, like, proper, and, like, what people are doing about it. Now, during my sophomore year, wow, I'm getting into detail. I'm gonna have to, like, abbreviate this, but I'm getting into a lot of detail. my freshman year, the interesting thing about Heights is that it's like it is huge. At least during those years, it's the size has been significantly reduced. But during those days, it was like legit 4,000 students, official and unofficial. But yeah, and also like the Heights is an interesting thing. There are a lot of like bougie multi-million-dollar houses here in families, most of whom send their children to private school. Some send the children to public school. And predominantly of European ancestry. But then there's also like on the other side of the spectrum, the socioeconomic spectrum, materially impoverished, and additionally, and so we have like the bourgeoisie walking the halls in a modest number. The ratio is about 65% people of African ancestry and 35% people of European ancestry. So it's a very different racial dynamic as well, and it was thuggish ruggish, and it's not as thuggish ruggish as other spots here in the Cuyahoga, but it's thuggish ruggish legit. We would have gang fights. We had a drive-by shooting where a brother got killed just a couple blocks where I live during that period, and so it was serious. And I'm just graduating from shelter 13 student 8th grade class, and here I am in the mix. So what I do? Class to class, that's it. No stopping, whatever. Lunchtime happens, I'm going to the library. I found out about that about one of my big buddy guys that I met in an orientation to high school. He's like, you can go to the library during lunchtime, and that's what I did pretty much through my high school career. So avoided drama and everything else like that for the most part. I still got in a fight in the library. How about that? Cat came up and clocked me in the jaw. So we had to deal with that. It wasn't in a peaceful way. But anyways, that's another story. Serious. Anyways, so that's the scene of Heights. It's all different types of things. And when I talk about like I say gang fights, and that sounds serious. We didn't call them gangs. Some were actually legit gangs. There was the folks and the word. I only utilize the word Lord to describe God, but what the name of the gang was called the Vice L's. And those are legit gangs that have a constituency to the West Coast and further. So we had those at Heights, but then we also had things like groups called the Homeboys, the Brothers, and this, that, and the other. Those are actually names of groups, social groups. But often, particularly in those first few years, on the main street where my school was, there'd be melees of hundreds of cats scrapping. It wasn't every day, but it was regular enough. So that's the scene. And what to do in that kind of situation? Like I said, I would literally go from class to class. I wouldn't stop, wouldn't talk to people, whatever. Wouldn't socialize. Didn't have many people to talk to anyways. And then when I was my lunchtime, that was the dreaded hour. Straight to the library and hide out in the library. I ain't ashamed to say that either. I did that. And I think it was beneficial, and it wasn't a guarantee, and it wasn't always. Sometimes I get like a bag of Doritos or something like that on my way up, or maybe catch a quick thing early when the hour begins, because cats kind of would take about 15 minutes to gather into the period. So I would eat like a quick thing and then whoosh, go up. I found the back way steps where I could like sit on the steps for a minute and have a meal by myself before the hall guards would catch me, whatever, and then get to the library. So anyways, the ins and outs when you get into things. So that's what I do. Now it looks all different because the school has been renovated. But anyways, my point is that sophomore year, the other thing is that the classes that I attend look very much like my private school, Eurocentric, because there's very strong apartheid in the way that the educational structure is. The curriculum, not just the curriculum, but like how it's structured. First of all, there are categories of classes, and it's not even just classes, but it's programs. So obviously we have the IB program, the International Baccalaureate, and the AP, which is Advanced Placement. It's just like the honors courses. So IB and AP were kind of bunched together. So anybody who wasn't in the IB could take AP classes and still have that. Then there was accelerated classes. Then there was expanded classes, and then there were standard classes. So that was like the spectrum of like the intellectual rigor of the training. So my sophomore year, I took all IB classes. I was in the IB program, and so all my classes looked very much like my class in at the Montessori school. And the vibe, the people, the conversation, the culture was very much like that. However, when the bell rings and people go into the hallways, it's a different world. It's a different world. So anyways, all right, there's that. I'm getting to a point here. So one day, my sophomore year, that's when my school starts to protest. Like the brethren, African brethren, are frustrated that there's an absence of any African teachers. There's an absence of any African classes with African curriculum or African oriented curriculum. And so, like I said, this is sparked by music, by Spike Lee doing the right thing, and Malcolm X and everything else like that. And so Malcolm X came out a few years later, but there was still that things building up to that point. So cats were on that vibe, and so eventually, like, cats were like protesting. There were sit-ins, there was marches, and it wasn't like today because it wasn't a thing back then. Like, cats didn't do this too tough. It was 20 years since people had done this. Like through the 80s, cats was like luncheon. So at the end of the 80s and the early 90s, for people to be doing this, like, yo, what's going on? And that's what I was saying. Yo, what's going on? Hey, what's going on? I have to say this because if I don't say that, people ain't gonna get the reference. Many people. All right. So it wakes people up, and it was unavoidable. Like it was like everybody was thinking about this, couldn't stop it. And as much as in those elitist bourgeoisie conditions, we try to avoid those things that are controversial. I feel like some cartoon character with hair freezing out. This is the end of the day kind of vibe. So in these environments of elitism and everything, we don't like to talk about like the controversial stuff or whatever else that calls out the duplicity, hypocrisy, whatever else. Yo, I'm not even getting into anything else with this joint. All right, yes, ma'am, God willing. All right. So I remember specifically being, and also I'm one of the few people of African ancestry in the IB program. There are a number of other sisters in it. There's one or two brothers who I think are in a few of the AP classes. Maybe one being involved in the IB all the way through. But anyways, sophomore year, I remember specifically being in Francais class where, you know, everything is on Francais. And it's like next level. Like my Francais was legit. People speak to me through the years and say, oh, you have such an accent. Yo, I studied for like a decade. So these days it's been a while since I do it, practice it regularly. But anyways, in that, we're thinking of Francais, we're speaking, we're discussing, having advanced conversation, whatever. And I remember like at some point, like in this one class, this one day, like our teacher, I was gonna say her name, but I'm not gonna blow up the spot today at the moment. The teacher was like doing the lesson, writing something on the chalkboard. Do cats still have chalkboards these days? Whiteboards or whatever. So writing on the chalkboard, and like nobody was paying attention. Everybody was kind of just like talking with each other and talking about like the protests and the citizens that were happening at that moment. And so eventually, like the teacher, like stopped the lesson, and she's like, "Okay, we're gonna talk about this, mais en français. We're gonna talk about this, but we're gonna talk about it in French." I like that about her, so I respect that. So that's what we did, and that showed me like, yo, they're stopping like school learning at this point. And then the other thing also in that session, when people were like giving the students, my brethren, my collegial brethren, were given the okay, the sanction to talk about this. Like we talk about it for a little, and then they turn to me and like say, "Peter, what's going on?" Like I'm like, "What? Why are you asking me?" Because all my other brethren have been in the public school system for the most part for their entire lives. They know the African brethren that are doing this, and I was like, "Why are you asking me? You know these people these people." That sounds so pejorative, but you know these brethren for all these years, and you're asking me, what? And I was like, "Oh." Because you see the melanin connection, yeah? All right. Well, now I've been given an assignment, so that's what I do. And I start to see like how messed up things are. I couldn't tolerate it at that point. Like I couldn't like just sit back and just like take it. I was like, nah. So I dropped out of IB. The next year I dropped out of IB. I'm like, this is BS. I don't care how sophisticated everything the education is. When it's like derogatory and it doesn't like affirm who I am, what's the use of having that? It's enslavement. As intellectual and elitist as it may be, and however many opportunities it may provide, it's all enslavement. So, bye. Now, I continue to take AP classes in certain courses, Did that immediately contradict what I just said? You can take it as you like. But I dropped out of the IB program, and I didn't take standard classes, but I took some accelerated courses, and I had classes, because up to that point most of my classes were with people of European ancestry. So I had classes with brethren of African ancestry. I went out for the American football squad for the first time, playing organized American football, thinking I watch enough American football on TV. I know how to be quarterback. Weighing about 270 pounds. That's what I'm going out for. I made the bench. But anyways, that's other details. But the point of this is that it gives me purpose. It gives me a mission. And the mission is to uplift community, and particularly the community of people of African ancestry. I listen to what the grievances are. And much of it involves money. We need money for this. We need money for that. Schools, housing, health and well-being. That's what we need. That's what we want. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to university, and I'm going to learn and study how to uplift the community. And that's the kind of vibe I started pursuing and building and being supported on. I got accepted into a number of programs based on this. I attended at HBCU, Hampton University. I study economics, and that's what I do. And when I study economics, I become aware that an undergraduate degree isn't sufficient. I need to know how the system works. I need to know how the system works. I need to know how institutions work. So, I need to go to law school. And still, that 3/5 compromise is in the back of my mind of saying, is this serious still? Because the surface of society and the convo and everything is this PC, we don't believe this. But still, if we don't believe that, why was it necessary to be taught to me at 11 years old? If we don't believe it, why are we still studying it? So that's also in the back of my mind too. And so university, I'm like, okay, got to go to school, and business school too. Now there might be a little bit of a greediness or an ambitiousness of doing both, prestigiousness of look at me, graduate school. And again, this is 20 years ago. Not a lot of cats are going to graduate school. I think many further cats are master's degrees are a way of distinguishing oneself from the undergraduate population. So it's increasingly frequent. But back then, not a lot of cats were doing master's degrees, let alone dual degrees. So I was applying for both business school and law school. Didn't get into the law school, and I felt I was guided to attend a prestigious law school, like an elite law school, because I'll get to that maybe in a minute. But so long story short, I got into business school. I didn't get into any law schools I wanted to. I got into one local here, Case, and that's what I was planning to do. Then I got into the business school here, and that allowed me to get the MBA in 1 year, travel abroad, and then go back to law school. And also I could reapply, and that's what I did. So I went to Manchester, England. Wow, way detailed. What's that? Maybe it's late. Maybe I'm less reserved or whatever. This is way further than what I was planning to share. Way further. I go to Manchester Business School. It's now affiliated with the University of Manchester. That opens my mind. I meet brethren from all around the earth, and I become increasingly aware that the answers, the solutions of uplifting the black community in the United States are connected with what's happening around the earth. I get out of the plantation and I get perspective. When I come back, I reapply to law school. I get accepted into Georgetown, and so then I'm like, okay, I'll go to Georgetown, and that's what I do. I actually work for a year with Amnesty International, learning about human rights, and then again, the experience that I have with brethren from around the earth beforehand, studying at Manchester, is complemented and not fulfilled or completed, but just strengthened by my experience with Amnesty International, because Manchester shares the civilizational business kind of world of the earth, and the conventional leadership kind of experience of the earth, studying again corporations, businesses, governments, societies, studying economic behavior, and additionally Amnesty International shares the other side of that story, the human rights violations, the atrocities that are done in that process that are not included within those academic papers. And so I remember being in the Amnesty office in the Potomac area. Georgetown actually connected me with that. And being in the lobby and just seeing the dossiers, like there's bookshelves on both sides. Every country of the earth, there was a dossier of like all the human rights violations up to that point, contemporarily. And I was just like, it was overwhelming. I was like, wow, there's so much going on the earth. So again, study, observe, process. And so again, the picture gets fuller. And again, I recognize, the answer, the solution is connected. It's not just a matter of like surface level solidarity or whatever, but like intrinsically, like the solutions we need to find how to work with each other, because that's the nature of this. So that's Amnesty. Then I go into law school at Georgetown, and that's a whole nother thing. And I've actually recorded hours of just that joint, of anecdotes and stories of that. But long story short, first year, seriously think about dropping, hardly attended classes, passed the exams, made it through first year, with including the course on property that talks about my ancestors being property, and it's the law in the books today. So when we talk about, we don't believe this, yes, it is believed. It's the law still today, and people want to reference like all these amendments and everything. No. Wake up, recognize, and do better. So that's what I saw first year. Now, after I finished first year, I did another study abroad. I went to Africa. I walked in the soil, spiritual awakening, affirmation, beauty, miracle. Came back assured. Still nasty, but like it's going to be okay. And at that point, I made a decision of being peace, and I knew I wasn't going to practice law at that point. I'm not going to take an oath to God to uphold the U.S. Constitution. I ain't going to do it. But I ain't going to be like too belligerent about it either. I want to find something to be protagonist with. So that's when I started building this thing called ASONA with some brethren from the law school, which is initially a multicultural think tank. And the initial premise of ASONA, I'm going to see if I can conclude this in the next 10, 15 minutes. And then share some of these concepts, because it's important to share these concepts. And the joint that's beginning, I think, is beginning in half an hour. I'm going to pause for a minute just to make sure. Yeah, all right. So, don't get my dinner, but still. And that's important because, that's another thing. All right, so law school, multiculturalism, ASONA. So it was actually just called ASONA at that point, or ASONA Inc., but ASONA. But the basic premise was this: to be a think tank, to put out a journal, and to invite our colleagues from our different. So I should preface this by saying this. During that second year, particularly first year, I was friends with brethren from all different type of ethnicities, and that's been my life, particularly since being abroad. Been intentionality with that. So been intentionality, yes. So I connect with brethren. I build beautiful friendships with brethren from all different types of ethnicities in law school, and actually, it's one of the few. Well, all right, that's what I do. My second year now, wait a minute, it's not the BMOC, but now I'm seasoned and whatever else, and so those relationships are increasingly solidified. We're all increasingly confident. A lot of brethren had just spent a year interning at law firms, making big bank, even just in that summer, and so they're like, oh, this is what life is like now. So does that seem hypocritical to my rebellious type thing? I'm not omni, because I'm not everything, but I'm not anti. So if I'm not anti, is that omni? Anyways, to unravel that's going to be another convo. Second year, all the different ethnic-based law student associations, APULSA, CULSA, JULSA, another CULSA with a C, BALSA, L'Alianza, though essentially it was off It was on hiatus officially. The Muslim Student Organization, again, officially on hiatus officially, but still connected with Brethren accordingly. So all the ethnic groups, those that I mentioned, are Asian, Pacific American, Korean, Caribbean, Latino, Middle Eastern, Muslim, which is significantly Middle Eastern, but obviously includes an entire diaspora. Jewish Law Student Association, all the ethnic-based law student associations. I attend the events. Oh, SALSA, South Asian Law Student Association. I attend the events. I go to Diwali celebrations, and additionally, and like genuine, because I already know I have friends. My friends are now the leaders of these organizations at this point. So that's just what I do, and that's how we roll. And so the endeavor of Asona is like an extension of those friendships, of like, okay, these are all professional. I expect them to do their own thing with law and everything else. Like, I don't expect them to do nicers for the rest of life or whatever. But right now, like, we have this rapport, and so we can share our insight, and we also have our respective networks and colleagues that we know from other endeavors, undergraduate and additionally within our communities. So we have an extended collective network of many brethren of substantial credentials who can provide articles, paragraphs, and other kind of contributions to a journal to provide valuable insight about the experience of these ethnicities, each of these ethnic communities, to the aggregate of our community. So that was the basic premise of Asona. Did not get hardly any support, not from professors. Students appreciated it. Students were like kumbaya, and I don't know if that was just necessarily a response to me. Maybe, I don't know if it was gaslighting or whatever else, but like my fellow students were supportive and like wanting to contribute or whatever. But like in terms of like getting substantial support, like financial and everything, professors would not. Maybe they knew like what kind of cat I was, and like the implications of my perceived rebelliousness. I'm not a rebel. I'm actually the law, and it's the U.S. law that is rebellious. But that's another story. But maybe the professors like could see the writing on the wall. Like, yo, that cat ain't playing our game. So even our African brethren professors. Now I can't say I wasn't supported, because there were a number of African faculty, African descendant faculty that are very supportive through the years to this day. And I'm very appreciative of that. But in terms of like backing this venture, and I don't think it's necessarily me. I think it's a matter of just multiculturalism. Like, this was legit, thoroughly like balanced multiculturalism. I mean, it wasn't like favoring any particular community. Let me tell it. But that's generally it. And I think that ethnic communities don't necessarily value that and prioritize that. Particularly when it's done by an entity that's not the government or some bigger entity or whatever, that they get kudos for association. But when it's just some startup cat, what's the benefit? What's the quid pro quo? And that's usually what I find often is the situation when doing when larger institutions and communities participate in such multicultural initiatives. Like, what are we getting out of it? And it's beneficial to be pragmatic, but still, it's disappointing. So anyways, no follow through, and I was disappointed about that, to be honest. And professors, mentors I have through those years up to that point, I couldn't even like, I would just start to describe it and kind of would get shut down before even getting to an ask or anything else like that. So anyways, didn't get funded. Now I stuck with it through my third year. Wasn't going to practice law. Wasn't even looking at another job. Was focusing on this Asona ashram, or excuse me, just Asona. Meanwhile, I got beat down by the police, charged with a federal felony assault. Had that weighing over me for a semester. I was president of BALSA by that point because I had been asked to do so. And stress. I failed a class my last semester, spring semester. Disagreement with the professors. That's another story. I had a bonus semester of law school. And so I'm like, okay, this gives me a further time to plan Asona, because by that time it was like struggle to get people involved. But the handwriting was already on the wall. And then by that bonus semester, the 11th of September happens. And by that point, there was no kumbaya, effectively. It was circling of wagons, and you're either with us or against us. So, graduated law school. A few months later, got sent to a psych ward. Why? I didn't play the game. And so now it's the consequences. So that begins my spiritual journey for the next 20 years. I figure if I'm not going to practice law, I better find one that I do agree with. If I'm not going to practice American law, I better find a law that I do agree with, that I do believe in genuinely. So that's when I begin to give this religion thing a try. I was not religious too tough before that. I believe in God, believe in the golden rule throughout my life. My parents didn't raise us in any specific religious denomination or even tradition. But I knew people from many different traditions, had conversations, so I knew a little bit about a number of different religions. So went to the source as much as possible, read the Torah from front to back, read all English translations, read the Bhagavad Gita from front to back, the Digha Nikaya and the Dhammapada from Buddhism, the Quran, the Gospels, or the Bible, actually, the whole Bible, and then also the Tao Te Ching. And wow, this is it right here, beautiful. And that begins my career as that is part of the beginning of my career as a spiritual diplomat. And I find people who do this as well. And at the same time, I find out like, wow, there's this thing called being mixed. I find out about Maven magazine. My brother gives me actually a magazine. He knows a photographer who did a shoot for one of the articles for the magazine. He's like, yeah, here, you might appreciate this. And it's like, yo, what is this? So then from there, like, I get into the mixed game. And so that goes on for a number of years. Now, at the same time, like, I'm off the grid by that point. Like, once I got locked in the psych ward, that's a done deal for any type of, like, career in elitism, whatever. There's too much stigma with that. Cats ain't going to be with that. And I knew that. And I was, angry. A lot of anger. And the anger is utilized against us. So we have to learn how to reconcile. Not accept, but reconcile. Find the purpose, and then, again, do better. And that takes a long time for me to learn. And in the meanwhile, getting some nasty treatment, some nasty business in the process. It's easy to get angry from that too. But again, I learned a discipline to strengthen and solidify myself, regardless of what the conditions are and what the treatment is. So that goes on for the next 20 years up through today. How can I like sum that up in like 3 minutes? At first, I lived at home. That's it. I turned into I could say a hermit. And basically all I did was read, study, go on the internet. I was done with America, done with the U.S. Not reaching out to anybody in the U.S. Done with that. But looking for people internationally. Who can I connect with internationally that isn't like committed to the U.S. Constitution? And so I find some brethren, and I find this thing called the interfaith movement. I find institutions, organizations that have been doing this for over a century now. Well, yeah, even then. So I start to connect, make phone calls, participate on discussion boards and stuff like that, and become increasingly knowledgeable about the history and like the ins and outs of the interfaith movement. And it ain't a perfect thing. There's a very strong acquiescence to conventional authority, governments, corporations, big bank, whether that's kings or otherwise. But still, at the surface, sharing a message that's very necessary. Pandering to youth to get that energy in next generation. But anyways, I'm not getting into critique about the interfaith movement. Blessings and peace to all brethren, all kinfolk in the interfaith movement. Blessings and peace to all kinfolk around the earth, everywhere. Love too. So that was the first few years. Ain't talking to nobody in the United States. Hardly left the house. Whenever I did, got stopped. I was looking kind of like this. I didn't have this on at that point, but I had wild hair, still a beard. And again, Cass was hysterical, paranoid during that period. I didn't get called Osama too much during that period. I got called it later. And I was like, wait a minute, that's so old. But anyway, that's another story. That was the first few years. After a while, I attend the Parliament of the World's Religions. Is that what does it? Actually, I attend a few conferences before that. I attend one Interfaith Youth Corps conference. That was the first time I was like, that was my first legit social experience in like 5 years, in like half a decade. I went to a conference and talked to people. That was, it was weird talking to people again after 5 years. and that was very awkward. And I was somewhat older than everybody else. By that time, I was maybe like in my early 30s, 31 or thereabouts, 32. And I felt awkward because most of the people were like university students. Some were like, there were old elders there. The organizer, I'm not gonna say his name because we have some unreconciled concerns. So I ain't gonna say his name. Would I say his name otherwise? Maybe I probably would, but not gonna do it now. And don't mean no hate, no shade or whatever, but just like not doing it. But I was debating even saying the name of the organization. But anyways, he's my age, so I felt less concerned about that. But that was my first social experience after 5 years graduating law school. Then after that, like things started to soften up. There was an introduction of Facebook during that period. I heard about Facebook before that, but there was an executive from a young executive from Facebook who was giving a presentation at the conference. So I was like, well, I guess when we attend these things, there's this like spirit of just like, oh, everything's fine, yay. And so we get kind of like softened to like be a further agreeable. So I'm like, okay, I'll get a Facebook account. Ha 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 ha. Anyways, this is interesting biography compared to the previous joints I do, and that was 3 minutes over that way. Eventually, I become increasingly connected with local things, and I get involved with local councils and organizations and initiatives and projects and events, and I do that for a number of years. I attend the Parliament of the World's Religions. I was already involved with it for a number of years before that, but I actually attended physically in the land of the Wurundjeri, Australia. That was about 12 years ago, and I get increasingly involved with that, increasingly involved with joints here. I joined a religious congregation. I can say it was a Jewish congregation, and I'm a member of that for a number of years. Then I began to recognize that like there's a point of like there's a threshold that had been reached, like the efficacy, like it had, by that point it had been like a decade since I graduated from law school. This is a decade ago, and like I could see like, I saw, like, first of all, the cyclical nature of the interfaith movement, as I said before. A lot of the people who are just so gung-ho and enthusiastic get reassigned or move on. Even when they're members of a congregation, like, then they go back to something else or whatever. I'm like, what's going on? So I saw, like, some of the shortcomings and the short-term involvements in additionally. And so I could see that a lot of the intentionality of many of the participants is not actually to significantly change things, but just kind of like respond to things as they happen and kind of like keep things kind of somewhat moving or just copacetic without actually like addressing the significant severe concerns of society, and frustrated about that as well. So, and I recognize, like, not rather than pointing fingers, because I was becoming increasingly spiritually knowledgeable at this point. So I recognize, don't point fingers, point at myself and what can I do. And it's beyond that cliche of be the change you want to see in the world. It's like legit, like it begins with how we live, and when we live it, then we, first of all, we get better insight about it, and we're thorough and legit and honest about that, and people see that genuineness, and then respond to it accordingly, and build and cooperate, and get inspired by that accordingly. Let me tell it. So anyways, I give my car away. How'd I get a car? Yeah, it's a whole nother story. But I started making some life changes about like dedicating to this game of community building, and there's a vision since law school days that involves like a network, an international network of villages that are modest villages. It's not imperialistic or whatever, but just like brethren who are living in different places, who are like essentially off the grid and independent, autonomous, but still connected with community, and additionally, and participating and communicating, cooperating with brethren from other villages as well around the earth. So that's a vision that's been around since before law school, but that continually evolves through that decade through today. And so I become increasingly dedicated to that a decade ago, giving the car away, doubling down on like being distanced from the grid. I go back off the grid essentially at that point. I was on the grid for a while. I had a driver's license even, but it was beneficial because that driver's license helped me to get to all those events and activities and everything else like that. But like I said, after a while, I recognized the limitations of that and how expensive it was to maintain that lifestyle. So I just like, okay, I got to simplify and dedicate, concentrate. That's what I do. Go back off the grid essentially, I attend the next parliament in the land of the Ute, otherwise known as Utah, and it's been an hour. So, to be honest, I recognize ain't getting to the concepts at this moment. So what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes, because the joint starts in 10 minutes, I'll wrap this up, God willing, and then record the concepts as a distinct video accordingly. So I'll work on wrapping this up. And there's a lot that ain't been covered, but there's too much that's been. I say too much, but there's been a lot that's been covered or uncovered. Ha ha. Anyways, all right. So attend the Parliament of the World's Religions, and this was 6 years ago. And long story short, I have a spiritual awakening during that point. Now, by that point, I was actually an ambassador with the Parliament, so I had an official status, and there was an occasion of just like, I've been struggling with things. I was weighing over 400 pounds, vegetarian. And so I just recognized I had a spiritual awakening, and I basically committed myself to an ethical discipline and that I've been struggling with to do legit, not even knowing if it was actually possible, not seeing many other cats, actually no other cats, at least who are living a householder life that are doing it. But the basic discipline is honesty, sobriety, peace. For me, that includes veganism. I wasn't a vegan at that point. Chastity and sharing. So from that point, transformation. Now I've put on some weight because I can do that off and on depending on conditions. But I dropped 200 pounds without, I won't say without even trying, but it wasn't concerted. It wasn't a concerted effort. It was just like a lifestyle change and the result of that lifestyle change. But even further, it was like a respect for all life. Women, plants, animals, men, boys, girls, babies, stars. Is that life? Pause. So, just a respect and appreciation for all our relatives. How about that? Hey. And from that, being healthier, stopping abusing myself, because I recognize that's what I was doing when I was weighing that much. I was hurting myself, and that hurting myself was the manifestation of a guilty conscience, and that guilty conscience was the consequence of the harm that I was causing to others. That within my righteous game, it was very difficult for other people to call me out, because everybody's causing harm in one way or the other, and cats don't want to call other cats out because that means they make themselves susceptible to being called out. So they want that. They want that. So that means everybody be quiet. And so I wasn't saying anything about you, so don't say anything about me. So cats couldn't say too much about me because I was living a very thorough, righteous lifestyle in many ways, but not complete. And there is no complete. But there are many guilty practices amidst that righteousness that I knew I was doing, and I knew there was some harm. I knew there was harm eventually in one way or another, and in considerable ways to others. So I stopped. I do better. I stopped hurting myself as a result of that, and then I become healthier. And I tell people, at that point, and even to this day, I'm the healthiest I've ever been in life. That's legit. I could say maybe the first few years of my life, 5 years of my life, but I just say I'm the healthiest I've ever been in my life. I'm not the fittest I've ever been in my life, but I'm the healthiest. And also the other thing I say is that I finally become the man I always want to be. So I mentioned doing the mixed game for many years. I'm not going to go into the spiel of all the different. Well, I'll do a summary of organizations. I'll leave that for another point. But so that's what I do. How do I support myself? How do I get this light on and the heat on and the electricity and the Wi-Fi? How about this? I say this. Oi, the battery is about to run out. How about that? and all it takes is a plug-in. I don't know why I'm even. Oh no, actually the battery's fine. That's different. That's a different metric. But still, I don't need to do that. How do I do all this? Where do I get the support from? This is how I explain it. Everything comes from God. That's what I believe. That's my belief system. We can translate that into your belief system however you like. We can talk about that, but everything comes from God. So that's first. Now, God works through the earth and the universe. So the things that we are provided are manifestations within this universe and earth. So that's like the next step. Now, we'll focus on the earth at this point because presumably that's where we're all sitting or situated on. So the earth provides the material sustenance that I need in this life. Then from there's conventionality, because conventionality provides a methodology for which the nutrients of earth and the supplies and necessities of earth are provided to me. Now that's where we get into the finities of this joint. Convention, because convention is a man-made construct, and with the man-made construct there are all different types of rationales. I can talk about the government, I can talk about my family, I can talk about my friends. All of these have a hand in the rationales that are explained on how I get what I get. I can tell you that I live a very frugal life, a very simple life. I concentrate on what are priorities. So at the moment, ain't got no furniture. That's not true because I'm preparing to move, so I gave it all away. But at the same time, I'm utilizing a rather expensive laptop because predominantly the quality and the experiences of previous laptops. So anyways, that's way. Wow, how to get into this just like running my Gap joint. Anyways, Gap, is that it? Trap, that's it. So anyways, that's just the personal bio. Here are the notes. And you can see where personal bio fits within these notes. One line at the beginning. I'm actually reminded of an incident, an anecdote that happens at a critical mixed race studies conference. Before I do that, though, I will give like the an outline of the concepts, the mixed heritage concepts. Now, to be honest, I'm recording this offline, and I plan to upload this when I upload the other joints. So technically, like whoever sees this is like, it may actually be favorable to the person, because what I can do is I can label the other one as mixed race heritage concepts, as distinct from this one. So if people are only interested in mixed race concepts, they can go on that one. Maybe there was intentionality about it from the very beginning. This one I can just label as personal bio. So people who want to hear about my personal bio can do that. Those that don't have to listen to this whole thing before I get to the mixed race heritage concepts. Ha ha, ingenious. Is that Inception? Wow. Anyways, outline. Mixed heritage concepts. Affirmation. Actually, I'm just going to run this down, because it doesn't take that long. It's the explanation of these joints that takes long. Affirmation. Here it is. My mixed race heritage is a communal identity. Wherever my ancestors come from, it's not a finite, insular intersection that is unique and odd and isolated. It's everything from which I come. It's a communal identity. That's the first thing. Second one is our mixed race heritage is an ancestral community. So being mixed race, as brethren who are our kinfolk who are mixed race, it's not a political identity. It's not a social identity. It's a spiritual, or it's beyond political. It's beyond social. It is a spirit. It's an ancestral community, and we can look at it this way. Like we can look at all. I look at all my ancestors, and there's like a tree, that actually goes like this. That gets narrower and narrower as we go further back into history, and it branches out. It's like an upside down tree, if you've seen a family tree before. So everybody who's in that tree is part of my immediate ancestral community. But the way this works is that everybody who's in that tree also has ancestors that are not my ancestors specifically outright until we get further and narrower in the tree, but that's another discussion. So brethren who are in my ancestral community, immediate ancestral community, have ancestors that are different from mine, and thus have other brethren who are part of that their ancestral community. So when we're all homogenous, it's just like, oh, we all look like each other, so we just take it for granted. Now, as mixed people, it would be like, whoa, what do we have in common? But the consideration is that when we extend our ancestral community to its fullest, well, that's getting to step 3. But that's what it is that we're looking at ourselves not as a political or social, but we are an ancestral. We are rooted. We have a history. We have a purpose. We have an intentionality, just as all of our other brethren on this earth at this moment. So that's the second joint. Third joint is that when we extend the ancestral community to its fullest, it's the entire earth. So all brethren, regardless of what brethren identify as or whatever else, are part of this mixed race, heritage, ancestral community. So we are the entire earth. I started getting into explanation, so I'm just going to run this down again. Knowledge of self. That includes the knowledge of the divine presence that exists within each of us. Having a knowledge of our ancestral language, the song, stories, and rituals and ethics of our heritage, and also the calendars when we practice these. Discipline of self is the regular routine practice of our knowledge of self. The song, stories, rituals, ethics, the calendars, and the regular routine. That means yearly. I'll do it the other way. It means momentarily, like moment to moment, day to day, week to week, moon to moon, year to year, and even beyond that. The life cycles, the life celebrations, and commemorations and rituals. So that's the discipline of self. When we have a knowledge of self, then we actually practice it on a regular basis. That's our discipline. Then we have the love of self. The love of self is our inner peace and security that's cultivated through this discipline of self. We know who we are within. We're secure with that. We're peaceful with it. It's not perfect. We still got things to learn. We still got to navigate the BS of this world and everything else, and the beauty too. But we have peace within it. And when we have that, we share that with others. That's love of self. So that's that joint. Now, advisory for mixed brethren. We're already at the half-hour joint, so I'm mindful of that. The advisory joint. Now, this is a pragmatic advisory, and I'm still working on like the details, and maybe that's why there's a delay on this joint. But the advisory joint is this. First, to find your ancestors as much as possible, where they're from, what the names of the lands are, what the names of the ancestors are, the people are, like the country, the culture, the language, as much as possible at this moment. If you and the names, as much as you can find. However, in whatever methodology, if it's looking through government records, if it's reading narratives, if it's going to family members or whatever else, however you feel comfortable, find as much you can at the moment about your ancestors as possible, just so you know, particularly the geography of where your ancestors come from, and then as much of the culture, language, and heritage of your ancestors as well. And this is a continual process, but there's a foundational beginning to that as well. So then from that, the advisory is to draw a map. And that map includes all of the areas, all of the regions where your ancestors are from. And two things with that map. One, to kind of like draw or imagine like the congruence of those geographies, like how those geographies are connected. And it might be for some cats the entire earth, or it might be for some cats just a very finite part of a continent or whatever. But whatever that geography is, like imagine the congruence, a connecting like area that connects all those regions, and then from that to consider the migration of your ancestors, how eventually your ancestors migrate from those lands through the years, through the generations to where you are at this moment. So that gives you some context and rootedness within how you identify. So then from there, the advisory is to determine for yourself, and this is something that you have to do for yourself, to determine what type of mixed person you want to be. And there are three kind of categories that we share here. One is the assimilationist mixed race, heritage brethren, or kinfolk. And in that selection, that's basically just accommodating to whatever it might be, one ancestry or one culture of one's heritage. It might be the culture and heritage of a completely different heritage and culture of wherever you find yourself or wherever you want to go. And to be honest, cats who make that decision actually don't make that decision. So it's somewhat of a, or at least not necessarily intentionally. So cats kind of just like, in my experience, kind of just like inertia, or however we describe that. So anyways, that's the first one category. Second category is to only focus on the geography and the heritage that you are derived from, your personal lineage is. So, and that's legit. If that's what you want to do, that's legit. And to be mindful of that and be like, look, this is all I'm interested in. Yeah, I'm mixed, but yeah, I'm not trying to be like all love the whole earth and everything. This is just where I'm focusing. I want to dive deep into this as much as I can. This mixed thing is nice, but I don't have a lot of in common with everybody here. So it's nice to talk about some things, but otherwise, I'm just doing what I do and delving into who I am as much as I can. So. And that means one's ancestry and heritage. So that's another legit thing. And just focusing on that, and cats can flow through the aggregate convo when cats have that inclination. I don't mean to be making any kind of hierarchy in this either. But the third category is like the world mix, and now this is when I follow or I select. And I might have some bias in that respect, and I try not to communicate it in that respect, because like I said, each one has its own legitimacy, and I don't mean that in a condescending way of like everybody gets a trophy, but legit, everyone is it's each one's prerogative. I'll just describe what this is. Haha. It's one that it embraces the entire earth, and there are a number of ways this can practice, just as there's a number of ways of each of these other categories can be practiced. But the way I pursue this, the way I cultivate it is this: I identify where I come from specifically, and the geography, the congruent map where my ancestors come from, and the migration that leads to where I am this moment. And I concentrate on that. I emphasize learning the languages as much as I can. I come from a lot of different lands with a lot of different languages, so that's a lot of learning to do. And to be honest, again, a side note, I recognize that at my age, 47, I'm still working to get married and have children. I recognize that my learning at this point is not necessarily for myself, because that's not necessarily the most benefit to others at this point. What's beneficial is for me to learn a proficient amount so that I can provide that knowledge to my progeny, God willing, and to other children and generations, and emphasize the infrastructure, the educational infrastructure, the community infrastructure that provides connection of that knowledge and learning to continuing generations. So that's my methodology. That's a prominent part of my methodology of learning, is learning some of the basics, where it comes from, and being familiar with it, and being able to share that with next generation and establish institutional infrastructure that makes it increasingly immediately available to continuing generations. So anyways, that's a side note about my methodology about formal learning at this point. But in terms of my ancestral lineage and heritage, I do focus that, I do emphasize that, but I also embrace the earth, and legitimately, that's how I identify, that's where my allegiance is. So even that which I'm rather confident that I abstain from having any immediate or intermediate ancestral heritage. I recognize that this experience of being mixed is very much the entire earth, and that it behooves us, particularly those who have this awareness, to organize with that premise, and that type of solidarity and cooperation. So that's how I identify. That's what I emphasize. And again, cats can identify how cats want to, and participate as how cats want to. But that's just how I do it. Earth. When people ask me, "Yo, what are you? Where are you from?" Earth. I said it before, but I'm gonna say it again. All right. So the next step is after making that decision about how one how you intend to identify, then doing it. Build yourself, learn for yourself, build family, married, have children, God willing, and build community and continue the process. There's another intermediate step that was in the middle of this, higher law authority. This is important. So I mentioned drawing that map of your ancestors and the regions and everything, the migrations. And here's one thing to be mindful of as well, before making the decision of how you identify, to recognize this. This is important. Whatever highest authority you believe in, whatever highest law you believe in, whatever you call that, great mystery, Tao, God, Allah, You can call it the law of science, however you describe that. It is the exact same highest authority and law that guides all your ancestors through time immemorial. Wherever your ancestors are on this earth, the same highest law, the same highest authority guides your ancestors all the way through to who you are today. There is a continuity, there is a congruence. There is an intentionality. So, I don't mean to be too preachy. That is affirmational. So there's that. Then from that, deciding how you identify, and then building yourself, family, community accordingly. So that's that. The next joint is commitment hierarchy. I can say that very briefly. Charity, tithing, almshouses, study, vow. This is something that the Buddha teaches about, like when one identifies a cause that one wants to belong in, to participate in. There's levels of commitment to that cause. You can provide charity every so often. It's nice, but we can't bank on it, can't trust on it, because we don't know if it's going to be there at some other point. Tithing is giving a portion of one's income, which is beneficial because we can plan further because it's a regular giving. But even then, there's only so much, so it's difficult to make big plans in addition, like building things. And that's where the third level of almshouses is. Those are large contributions and investments to the infrastructure of a cause. So it's building residences, it's building food places, kitchen houses, if we can use that word. But it significantly contributes to the systemic practice of the cause. The fourth level, if you can't afford that, does it seem somewhat hierarchical in terms of socioeconomics? Okay, how about this? At the fourth level, above that, study. Anybody can study, and that's a greater commitment than the almshouses. So study, whatever the cause is, learn the history, learn the principles, learn the names, learn the stories, learn the songs. Boom. Then, if you want to get higher in the game, and this is when in the methodology of autocracy, this is where the leadership officially exists. How about that? It's off the board. How about that? At the top of that hierarchy is vow. So once you've done the studies, you've learned enough, and additionally you know the principles. Now it's a matter of like, okay, I promise I'm going to live by this. I take a vow to abide by these principles, by these ethics, by this discipline, and in doing that, again, like I said before, stability, authority, trust. And that's the highest part of the leadership within the cause, is those who actually commit themselves to live day in, day out by the principles of that cause. And things settle themselves accordingly. So that's commitment of hierarchy. We're almost at the end. Logic of God. I'm going to say this very quickly. And this is something that, very heavy and everything else, but I'll just say it like this. And this is particularly with consideration of my atheist kinfolk, and additionally, but it's basically like a logical, it's a series of logical statements that lead to the affirmation of the existence of God, and invites further consideration, further discussion about the nature of God, particularly with the purpose of reconciliation amongst the kinfolk of earth. But this is, again, and it's like logical. It's just like straight up logic. So the first joint is this: God exists. That's the first thing. And if anybody's going to be purely logical, you have to recognize that that's a true statement. Now, I'm not saying what God is in this statement. I'm just saying God exists. So the fact that I'm just saying God is an affirmation that God exists. God could be just a word. It could be a delusion. God could be the omnipotent. But God exists. And any atheist who's going to be honest has to recognize that that's a true statement. So that's just the beginning, just to be honest, because there are a lot of people who claim to be very logical and rational, but then are dishonest. And so this is like affirming the honesty of that. So that's the first joint. God exists. We'll leave that alone at the table, like what God is, who God is, and additionally, but God exists. Second one is that there is a phenomenon in our experience. You can say in life, beyond life, in this universe, beyond this universe, but there is a phenomenon, a singular phenomenon, that brings everything to that encapsulates that. There's not even a word for it, but that everything is part of. There's a singularity. If you can talk about all these multiple universes and everything else like that, okay, fine. But even all these multiple universes are connected by some singularity. You can get so complicated in I was gonna say macro physics or metaphysics or whatever else, but all of that, it all is part. It all is a confluence of one singularity. Now, I'm in this step. I'm not calling that singularity necessarily God. You can call it God. You can call it, again, the great mystery. You can call it Tao. You can call it Allah. You can call it Brahman. You can call it Buddha nature. You can call it the law of science. We'll call it the law of science at this moment, just to balance the spectrum. So you can call that singularity the law of science, or if there's something else that scientists want to utilize to describe that, we can talk about that. But that's the same thing. But to recognize that there's just a singularity that everything is part of. So that's the second thing. Now, the third thing is this. This third statement of the logical statement is that within that singularity, within that phenomena, that ultimate singularity, there is sentience. Because we can recognize I am sentient. I observe sentience. I may be presumptuous, but I observe sentience around me. So that means that any singularity that brings all this, that has all this together, also has sentience. It doesn't necessarily mean autonomous sentience, but the fact that it has my sentience as part of that, everybody else's sentience as part of that, means that that singularity has the sentience as well. Now we can make presumptions about if it has any further sentience. Some may argue, and I do myself personally, that it exists beyond sentience. But we just recognize that there is sentience within the singular, ultimate singularity. That's the third joint. The fourth joint kind of brings it together, and is just simply this: some people call that ultimate singularity God. So was that like a trick to just bring it back to that affirmation? It's a matter of just recognizing that process. So because, like I said, from that process, then we can have a further honest discussion about nature. Like, what does that actually mean? Because, to be honest, people have utilized the name of God, the concept of God, the authority of God, in very heinous, selfish, greedy, lustful, murderous, atrocious, oppressive, all the other things ways, to this day, ongoing. So it's very reasonable for people to be atheist. Actually, many of the most believing people who are awake and acknowledging what's going on, particularly in the name of God, saying, yo, nah. So there's honesty with that. There's agreement with that. There's truth with that. But it's appropriate to recognize the distinction between the people who are doing that and the entity that it's being attributed to, and to have an honest conversation about that. So that's the consideration, and I think that's something that's beneficial for mixed people to discuss, because what I recognize is that within our mixed experience, our mixed community, there's a culture that is very secular, and that can be attributed to, at least in the activist scene, which is very liberal, rather rebellious, rather anti-authoritarian. And that translates into anti-religiosity, and thus anti-God, often, effectively. And further, many religions are rather strict in terms of behavior, and so in the scene of activism, again with liberalism, and additionally there's behavior that is very much ostracized and forbidden and prohibited, scrutinized, and I'm trying to think of another, persecuted within religious communities. And so within activist communities, there's this anti-judgmentalism of authoritarian figures. I mean, that's just another articulation of anti-authoritarianism, but particularly judgmentalism is appropriate to recognize it's not just a matter of general hostility towards authority in general, but towards the judgmentalism towards people's personal behavior. So, and then again, that gets attributed and forwarded to the notion and belief in God. So the consideration, the invitation is to be increasingly mindful, because as mixed brethren, For those who want to be in this game for multiple generations, it involves reconciliation. And that reconciliation involves understanding and patience. And that includes understanding and patience with those who have very different beliefs than ourselves, particularly depending upon the type of mixed heritage that we are claiming, particularly the earth kind, because very many people of this earth believe in God. One of the things that helps us to prepare for that is just for ourselves having an honest discussion and understanding and mindset about that. Not necessarily agreeing or whatever, but just understanding what it is, so that when we look towards building and cooperating with additional brethren who do have those beliefs, how we can genuinely participate in that cooperation with mutual respect and mutual integrity of our own beliefs. So that's what I'm going to say at this point. Hour and a half. It's not unprecedented. I've gone on further, but I'm gonna wrap it up there. And again, I'll recap these concepts again in another recording, God willing. I don't mean to be snarky or impositional or authoritarian on that, but it is my practice. So, that being said, namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mir, ni hao, zai jin, adios, te jacquis, SMP na asamuje, kele ofred, one love, peace, happiness, liberation.